Welcome to Haxby Shed. Here I am again in the workshop, but today I'm making a kind of public information film. A few weeks ago I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The good news is it's been caught very early, it's not aggressive, and there's not very much of it. So as my consultant said to me, you'll probably die with it, not because of it. So why do I want to tell you? Well, I want to tell you because it was a pretty scary experience getting to this point. And I didn't feel I had a lot of people to talk to help me understand really what was happening. And I think it would help you if I explain what my journey has been to this point. Now, as I make this video, I don't actually know if I'm going to publish it, because it's a very personal thing and it would be just so easy to just keep it to myself. But I have a friend, a close friend, who had his prostate removed because of cancer, and being able to talk to him was just so unbelievably helpful. Now, it might never affect you, it might affect your father, your brother, your partner, and if you have one, maybe even your son. About 3 years ago, I got up one morning, I went to the bathroom, nothing happened. Well, that's a bit strange, that's not happened before. Okay. And then maybe 2 or 3 times over the next couple of weeks, the same thing happened. Now, half an hour later, I was absolutely fine. But my mother was a senior nurse and she said to me, if you ever get anything wrong with your water department, just go and see a doctor, and when you see the doctor, don't just accept any tablets. Go and get yourself checked out properly. And I always remembered that. And these days, recently, a lot of people who are personalities have come out and said, oh, I've got prostate cancer. So I thought I'll do what I should do and go to the doc. Now, I explained, and he said, okay, well, we'll do a PSA test, prostate specific antibody, I think. And it came back as about 5.7, and then I had another one, and over a period of about 3 or 4 months, it ranged between 5.7 and 5.4. And he did a digital examination. Now, digital this way means that, digital examination. And he said, well, I'm not really worried actually, because your prostate is nice and small, it's not got any lumps and bumps. And there are many reasons why the PSA level can be elevated a bit, and the investigation isn't that pleasant. So I think we're fine. I'm not worried, you shouldn't be worried, off you go. Well, I was really pleased, of course, to get that reassurance. But in May, I decided to have a full medical. Now, they don't routinely screen and do full medicals here in the UK on the National Health Service, but because I thought it was a priority, I'd had another thing that happened. It's nothing to worry about, but it just caught me by surprise. So I actually prioritised and paid for a medical. It wasn't too expensive, actually. And I said to the examining doctor, will you just check this and that, and include in that my PSA level? And she said, well, we don't normally do that. I said, yeah, but 3 years ago it was a bit high. I'd really like to know what it is now and see if anything's changed. And she said to me, if we do it and it's above 3, we will recommend an investigation. Are you sure you want it done? And that was an interesting comment, really. I always imagined that doctors would say to you, this is the situation, this is what needs to happen, I'm going to ask you to do this. But they don't. They sort of say, well, do you want to know? Are you ready to know? And one of the reasons they do that is if your PSA is high, you've got to do something with that information. Now, you might choose to ignore it, but otherwise you've got to go through a process to the end of that process to understand what's happening. Now, PSA is a funny thing. It's like a check engine indication. Your PSA can be high because you've got inflammation, because you've got an infection, or of course, because you've got cancer. Now equally, you might have significant cancer in your prostate and your PSA is not high. It's just a kind of, that flashing light on the dashboard that says, just check the engine, check the engine. Now, when I got my results back, they were 10.7. Now here in the UK, anything over 10 should be an urgent referral to be seen within 2 weeks. So, panic, 10.7, I had no clue, because actually I don't have any symptoms really. That little episode 3 years ago came and went. And okay, I've got, an older man's toilet habits, let's say, but nothing that would be worrying me too much. So, I then quickly made an appointment to get checked out. And I went to see a consultant, and he said to me, okay, what's your age? So I'm not going to say my age, but you can guess it from my face, probably. Okay, with this PSA level, at your age, there's a 50% chance that you'll have cancer. 50% chance it will be inflammation, probably. And if you do have cancer, there's about a 65% chance it will be non-aggressive, and the difference, 33% chance, that it will be aggressive. So what we're going to do is to send you for a scan, an MRI. And we'll do the MRI first, see if we can see anything that worries us. And if there is something that worries us, you'll need to have a biopsy, if you choose to have one. Because all of this is elective, you don't have to do it. But I'm a technically minded person and I want to know, because I want to know the data to give me choices. So I went for the MRI. I wasn't concerned at all because it's completely non-invasive. They just put a kind of imaging plate on your tummy and you lie down in a tube, and the only thing that's slightly off-putting is, well, obviously you've got to be perfectly still for about 50 minutes in this case, and it's very, very noisy. But they put headphones on you and they play music in your ears, and it's absolutely fine. It's a bit claustrophobic, but in every other way it's perfectly fine. And you have the scan and off you go home and you wait for the result. So I can remember walking along a disused railway line on the Yorkshire coast. My phone rings and it's the consultant, and he says, well, we've had the result of the scan. We're a bit concerned. There's a sort of shape there. We'd really want it to look consistently the same shade, and we can see the structure, and we think you need to go for a biopsy. And it's like, okay then. So the tension is racking up a little bit. He said, I'll book you in for a biopsy, and we'll take some samples and then we'll know what we're dealing with. I should explain the difference between the MRI and the biopsy, and the purpose of each really. If I was looking for a shipwreck on the ocean floor, and I had with me a sonar side scanner and a robot camera, well, I would use the side scanner to tell me where the places of interest on the ocean bed are. Some of those places of interest will turn out to be outcrops of rock. Some will turn out to be shipwrecks. I don't know until I go and have a look with my camera what's actually there. But conversely, if I simply use my robot camera, I'd be hunting about for years and possibly not find anything. So the side scanner, in other words the MRI, tells the doctor where to look if they see something of interest. But just because they see something of interest, it doesn't mean that it's cancer. It could be just part of your natural structure within your prostate. So the thing that really counts in the end is the biopsy. Biopsies on their own, though, tend to give false negatives. Because you can imagine, if you're taking samples from anything, if you're taking samples from a tomato, for example, and you just randomly poke in there. If there was something that wasn't quite right, a bad part, you might not find it. So using the MRI first tells you where to look, and then that makes the biopsy far more accurate. Now I need to tell you about the biopsy. Actually, in the end, I had two. Here's my model. If you've got some medical knowledge, just give me a bit of license on this, please. Now, when a man hears that he's going to have a biopsy, he immediately assumes there's going to be some kind of barbaric medieval torture involving the carrot and the grapes. And that's absolutely not the case. That's not been my experience anyway. What they're trying to do is to sample a little bit of the tomato. And there are a couple of ways they can do this. They can go up here, which is your waste pipe, obviously, and come in this way into there, or they can come up underneath, which is called transperineum, and sample it that way. And the two methods have advantages and disadvantages each, and I had it done both ways, and I'll explain why. I did have a lot of trouble with this diagram actually, because the grape kept rolling away. Now, when they're doing a biopsy, they use ultrasound to target the area that they're interested in. And my first biopsy was through the waste pipe side. And so they put in a probe, and they also put in a kind of sleeve alongside that, and the whole thing's about 2 finger width, I think. And what they're able to do is to insert, and then they put a needle through this sleeve, and they inject local anaesthetic to start with, and then they take samples. And I was awake, and all I heard was a little click each time they took the sample, because the anaesthetic had done its job. Now, I can't say it was particularly pleasant. I'd rather be reading the newspaper and drinking a coffee, but I kind of put the discomfort of it out of my mind because I needed to know if I was okay or not. It took about 3 weeks to get the results. It has to go to the lab, and then certainly here they would hold a multidisciplinary team meeting where all the experts get around the table and they consider each case. Now, the result might be there's nothing wrong with you, or there is, and this is what we recommend. So after really a difficult wait, it was 3 weeks in all, and it's pretty scary waiting, I met with a consultant and he said to me, you know, how was the biopsy, etc. Small talk. And then he said, well, I have to tell you, we did find some cancer, but it was a very, very small amount indeed, and also it was very low grade. You'll probably die with it, not because of it, but it doesn't really match what we saw on the MRI. So why don't we wait 6 months and then you could have another biopsy and we'll see how you are then? Well, my response to that was, no, give me another biopsy now, because I need to know. I'm just that sort of person. I need to know, do you believe the MRI or do you believe the biopsy? Now, the logic of it says the biopsy tells you what's really there, but there's a chance that the person taking the biopsy, the radiographer consultant, you know, maybe he got some of the samples mixed up or he was having a bad day. You know, it happens to everybody. So I wanted a second biopsy. And the consultant said, okay, we'll do that. But I did explain, I was okay during the biopsy, but afterwards I fainted. Such a wimp. But I did. And apparently it's not uncommon, it's just the stress of it, even though it didn't really hurt or anything, it just was. And he said, well, this time what we'll do is we'll give you a general anaesthetic. And that means we can actually take quite a lot more samples. So the first biopsy I took, I had 14 samples, and then I went along as a day patient, had the general anaesthetic, and then had a further 24 samples. And that second biopsy was transperineum, meaning up underneath rather than from behind, let's say that. And there's less chance of infection that way, actually. Think about it. You can imagine why that might be. But also they can get to places that they can't always get to from the other side. It just depends where things are, that's all. And I got fantastic news, actually. Given that I do have prostate cancer, I got fantastic news because my second biopsy confirmed my first biopsy. And that was that I've got a very tiny amount and it's not very aggressive. So I've basically now gone on to active monitoring. So I'll have a blood test every 4 months. I'll see the consultant after each blood test. And what they're looking at is the rate of change of the PSA reading. So, you know, I'm not medical, I'll just give you an opinion now. If it went from 10 to 13 in 1 year, they'd be still concerned. But if it went to 10 to 13 in 5 years or 10 years, well, actually a man's prostate grows anyway as they get older, and that lifts the PSA level anyway. So they'd be looking to see how it was relative to, you know, how that happens naturally over a man's life. And then, if things are still looking good after a year, well, they might do another biopsy at that time. I would probably ask them to do one anyway, because I want to know. But after that, I would go on to 6 monthly blood tests. Now, if in a few years' time we find that the cancer's growing a bit quicker than we'd really like, then there are lots of options. I'd still be under 70 anyway. Now 70 is a bit of a cut-off for a man. On average, and I stress on average, men don't respond too well to general anaesthetics over the age of 70. If you're fit and well, it's fine. But statistically, they're a bit more cautious. But if it was growing faster than we thought it would, there's quite a number of treatments available. There's radiotherapy, there's radioactive beads that could be inserted. In the worst case, I could have my prostate removed. My consultant drew this diagram at our last meeting when I got the final result of the second biopsy. This is my prostate, this is the tube through the middle, so the carrot would be kind of here. And when I had my MRI, all of this looked suspicious here, this whole shaded segment. And after I'd had my first biopsy, they found only really one sample out of 14 was cancerous. And my consultant said, well, you've got a very small amount of cancer and it's a very low grade. But, and you could see that he was conflicted because he just couldn't match up this picture with the biopsy. So that's when I said, look, I'll have another biopsy now. And then they took 24 samples, and I think it was all in this area. And then again, they only found the one sample that was cancerous. And it proved to be, as he drew it for me anyway, that dot there. And it's not near the edge. It's very small, low grade. And therefore, you know, we can pretty much relax with that diagnosis. I'm still thinking now, oh my goodness, I do have cancer. But when he told me that, it was with such relief. You know, everything's relative, isn't it? So, in summary, I've been super lucky. I really should say, if you're in this situation, it's a personal choice, absolutely a personal choice. But I think it's important, I feel personally, for me, it was important to know. Now, you know, of those people that find they do have prostate cancer, maybe a third find that they've actually got quite advanced prostate cancer, where it's beginning to break out of the prostate, or it's even got into other parts of the body. And that's getting a bit serious, as you can imagine. You know, I won't say any more. Everybody has to make their own decisions. but they thought that was my situation. When they first looked at those shadows, those structures on my prostate MRI, he really thought that I had cancer, which had moved to the edge of the prostate and was beginning potentially to send out filaments from the capsule of the prostate out into, to spread. And my goodness, to find out that that's not the case, and actually probably, for most men, they never would have gone to see the GP anyway, the doctor anyway. It never would have been found. They probably would have been all right. When I look at the prostate predictor, now the NHS in the UK, the National Health Service, has a prostate predictor. It's a really fun site. You can decide, you can put in your figures and see how long you're likely to live. It's really good. If you've got nothing else to do, it's worth a try. And I could put in my age, my PSA level, the number of samples taken, and how many were cancerous, and what grade. And the grades are measured by something called the Gleason scale. I should have said that earlier, actually. Now, the Gleason scale runs from 1 to 5, and they add together the score of the two most significant samples. I think that's correct. So if you have two samples at Gleason grade 3, they would say that's a score of 6. I think, and I say I think, it's quite difficult to detect cancers at Gleason 1 and 2. Medical people correct me if I'm wrong, I get that feeling. But by the time you get to 3, they know it's cancer. But it's not particularly aggressive at that point. So although if somebody says to you, well, you have a cancer and it was Gleason grade 6, and you think, oh my God, it's 6 already? But actually 6 is good. If they say it's 10, sorry, but be worried, because that's really quite aggressive. So, he said it's Gleason 6. So that's about as good as it can be, really, detectable at this stage. So, I hope that helps you. Every year, 50,000 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in the UK. They say 1 in 8. Now, I can't quite get those numbers to add up if I'm honest with you, but it's still the the greatest amount of cancer diagnosed in the UK. And so many people watching this, by pure averages, might have it at some stage and might never know. I hope that's told you things that I just didn't know. I can only tell you with authority what happened to me. Anything else is just what I think I understand. So, check it with a doctor. But I hope it was useful to you. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sharing.